You are looking at a transplanted hairline where all that could have gone wrong actually went wrong.
Back then, it seemed more convenient and cheaper for my student budget. The surgeon had quite good marketing and was available to schedule the surgery in a very short time with a discount as well.
Now, before I start diving deep into this case and review for you all the 5 mistakes that went wrong with his hair transplant that actually didn't appear as mistakes in the first place, let me start with a story first, because it's going to be very important for you to hear this. It happened a year ago with one subscriber of mine who decided to book a call with me. He decided to make a better decision and upgrade his knowledge on hair restoration because he was confused, unsure which clinic to go to, whether hair transplant will even work for him or not. But what he started with was like, hey Matt, I want to get the best result. Where should I go? I'm willing to travel abroad. I'm willing to go anywhere, really. How much money do I need? And tell me exactly why. What are the things that make this or that clinic special that I should go there? And that was his result 1 year later. Now, why did I tell you this story? Because the subscriber of mine who ended up with 5 different mistakes in his hairline, you will see later, decided to take the exactly opposite approach towards choosing his clinic for the hair transplant. Instead of asking the question like, where can I get the best possible result worldwide with my hair, he was like, I just want to have it done in this country because I live there or I study there or whatever. And it was his case, his country was Romania. Instead of asking himself a question like the first guy, how much money will I need for the best result, or at least for an above average result? He was like, I only have $1,500 or $2,000 to spend because I'm a student, and I can understand that. But by doing that, you already put 2 very tight constraints onto your decision as far as choosing the best or ideal hair transplant clinic or doctor for yourself. And number 3, it was his inability to properly screen a doctor or what questions should he ask. He did not consult any experts before making this decision either. 22 years young subscriber of mine who back in the days was thinking about having a hair transplant done because he had already tried minoxidil. It gave him side effects like heart pumps and increased heartbeat, which he didn't like obviously, so he stopped. He considered himself quite young to start with finasteride back when he was 22, and although he didn't have a way recessed hairline for a 22-year-old, his corners were already pretty receded for a 22-year-old guy. And looking at himself in the mirror like this every single day, he didn't like it. And the only option for him was the hair transplantation. So he went to this doctor in Romania, which I'm not gonna name, and he offered him to do like 1,500 grafts. And during that time, he probably thought to himself, 1,500 grafts, easy peasy. He already pictured himself probably 6, 7, 8 months from this point having a way more defined lateral portion of his left and right hairline and more suitable for a guy who is 22. So he can finally feel like he's 22, right? So he has a consultation with this doctor who is again very famous in his country for doing like celebrity hair transplants and so on. So he's gonna tell him like, I'm gonna do your incisions, I'm gonna do your extraction, which is obviously a great thing. After the consultation has been done, he was led to the operation room where he started getting comfortable in the seat and expected the doctor to start the procedure. The doctor started the procedure and started doing the extractions. However, after that he left. And everything else had been continued by his technicians. He started being very confused, but because he was also on sedation and he didn't want to interrupt anything to cause even more potential problems during the surgery, he just kept sitting there and waited until the procedure will be over. Now, once everything has been over, he went finally to sleep, and the next morning he looked himself in the mirror and he started being very worried. The hair has not been transplanted in a way that it blends naturally with the existing hair around. There were obvious gaps on several spots, but little did he know back then that this problem was just the tip of the iceberg. So he writes the clinic and tells them that he wants to have a free touch-up. But they are like, it's too early to tell. It's just first day. You need to wait 6, 7, 8 months and so on. So we can actually even consider a touch-up. You know what? Let's just go to the 1 year mark after his first hair transplant so you can see what actually happened. The first mistake we see with this hairline is that the hairline is way too low on the anterior, left and right anterior sides of the hairline. It should have been positioned at least 1 centimeter higher. If the doctor would have done it, the density could have been actually better in the left and right portion, because the less lowering means more grafts for adding more density. The new temporal hairline has been also restored way into the front and also way too far down. So it should have been restored more like this. By that, you are creating a more natural look on a guy who is 22. He has a potential of turning into like a Norwood 5 or 6, and he's not on medication. You cannot do it. You shouldn't even consider temples, by the way, in such a situation. And the doctor should do only the necessary enough on the temple so the hairline lowering will not look super unnatural. Because I also agree that if only the hairline would have been done, there is a chance that it would look still unnatural because there wouldn't be anything done on the temples, and his temples have been already receded quite a bit. So you need to do a little bit there as well so it makes sense and it looks like nothing has been transplanted. Also on the left portion of the hairline, we notice how that convex shape of the hairline as a whole is changing abruptly to the concave shape at the left anterior portion of the hairline. So that's very odd. So the hairline design and design of his temples was the first mistake. Now this first mistake automatically caused the second mistake, which is the low density. And obviously for 1500 grafts you cannot expect a high density because it's a small amount of grafts. However, it can be redistributed in a way it's going to create a nice fullness and more naturalness compared to before. It could have been done in my opinion. However, because of an aggressive lowering of the hairline and temples, the doctor wasted too much grafts because he needed to cover a way of a large surface. And he decided to prioritize the coverage instead of density. If the hairline would have been done a little bit higher, the temples would have been moved so much to the front, the density with those 1500 grafts could have been much, much better. And it would have looked more natural. The mistake number 3 is also quite common in hair restoration, and it's high angles on the hairline and temples. There are also some multiple grafts, like double grafts in the hairline, which can cause the robust look and unnatural look, but in my opinion, in his case, it's not causing the biggest issue here as much as the high angles and improper hair directions. Now, he had a cowlick at the front of his hairline. What is cowlick? Cowlick is a specific feature which usually happens on the hairline. It can confuse the hell out of an unexperienced hair transplant doctor because the hair actually grows to the right, it also grows to the back and left, and then on the opposite, the hair from the mid-scalp growing to the front and then going a little bit to the left and right, and then they kind of meet in this point, okay, where it kind of creates this type of pattern. So we can see how the angles are high, and especially the right portion of the hairline we can consider it botched, unfortunately. And if I would say one thing that makes a low density hair transplant even worse, it would be high angles. They will make it even more detectable and more unnatural. But as we can see here, he's plucking the hair from the temples because of these high angles and also very low density and the obvious gap between the old temporal hairline and the new temple, which again hadn't been transplanted enough to make it blend better. Now, this improper hair restoration on the temple caused another issue, unfortunately, which brings me to the mistake number 4. Well, it's called visible scarring. And although it may not be visible to you guys, for him it is very visible. And by that we mean the little bumpy spots not only on his temples, mainly on the temple, but also on the hairline, when the angles have been done too high. Most of the guys already know this term as cobblestoning, and although this type of cobblestoning is not as severe as some other ones I have seen already, it is definitely serious enough for him to cause issues. And by that I mean, when he wants to shave these areas on the temple, he cannot really do it, because if he does it with a razor, he will also cut his skin, because the bump is not smooth, right? So if you try to shave it, you will cut it and you will create cuts and wounds. So you only can pluck it one by one. And if the recipient side is being created way too deep, it's gonna push out automatically more skin tissue than normal. This skin tissue will start residing around the newly transplanted grafts and will kind of form like a bump. And as heartbreaking as this case already got, there is one more thing, mistake number 5, that I have also noticed, and also my subscriber. If you look at his donor, you probably don't see any serious overharvesting. I don't see it with his case as much, although we could see maybe one or other little area which doesn't seem to look as full anymore as before. This is not serious overharvesting, fortunately. However, one thing we both noticed was the 1500 grafts he received on the front, they don't match with the extractions. Because if you look at his donor zone, we see that there have been way more extractions done than 1500. The exact number is not clear, but after me trying to count, I know it was a long process, I tried it twice, I came onto about 2,150. That means that they attempted more than 2,000 times to harvest 1,500 grafts. Now, what does that mean? That means that in the process of extraction of 1,500 grafts, the patient lost more than 600 grafts. They might have been damaged, they might have been also completely destroyed, and these are the grafts that he will probably never get back. And he cannot count with them for the next hair transplant anymore. Now, after all that, what he did was require obvious touch-up, which makes sense. However, I wouldn't advise to do it with the same clinic that obviously botched your first hair transplant, so why would you go there? Well, he went there because he was young, he was still on a budget, could have been done for him for free, so why not? I'm sure many guys would think like that, but this is a high-risk situation. They have already proven to you that they are like 10 out of 10 incompetent and incapable of giving you a good result. Why would you do another surgery? Why would you let them harvest even one single graft from your donor? He did go there and requested another 500 or 600 grafts to be transplanted, especially on the areas where the blending with the transplanted zone and existing hair zone was not ideal. So the patches were filled out, and he felt that the result after this second touch-up was a little bit better in terms of giving him a better coverage at least. So now he could style his hair. When the hair is longer, he can also camouflage a lot and use fibers, and I need to agree that actually he can make it look more fuller if you look at it from the top. However, he's just masking some mistakes which are still there. All the angles, all the low density in the hairline, and all that unnatural hairline design, and high angles on the temples, these things are still there. So he's asking me whether it's possible to ever have a good looking buzz cut, or he should kind of pursue that longer hair on top. And regardless which way you decide to go in the future, I would start with the following. Number 1, I would have all that hair in the temples removed, and also the anterior parts of the hairline on the left and right. Probably it would be around 700 to 800 grafts even, which means almost the half of that first surgery would need to go. Now, the good thing is that the hair could be reused. So while the doctor is extracting it and correcting the surgery, he could be simultaneously transplanting the extracted grafts into the mid-scalp or somewhere where you need it more. The bad news is also that it probably wouldn't be just one correction, but 2 sessions, because after you kind of remove some of these grafts from the temple and hairline, it can happen that some of them will still grow in, because it can happen that there is a double or maybe single that appears as a single, but it's actually a double because it has 1 follicle that is resting. Or maybe it's a triple, but you see a double, there's 1 more follicle hidden, so you extract the double, but there will still be another one, later on. So you'll get some hairs which will kind of, be still there after the removal. So you need to do another removal, if you know what I mean. And it can be especially annoying on the temple when you harvest it and some hairs will still sprout a couple, months later. So be aware of that. But that would be the first step, to remove it and simultaneously try to refine the hairline with more singles to make it look natural for that potential buzz cut that you want maybe, and also add that extracted hair into these areas where you need it more on the mid scalp. Step number 2 will be get on medication. If you cannot tolerate minoxidil, as you mentioned, you need to do at least low dose oral finasteride, like 0.2 milligram a day, or topical finasteride of your choice. You can experiment with that 0.025% low dose topical finasteride with relatively good DHT suppression in the scalp and pretty low DHT suppression in the plasma. And although you had only 2,100 grafts transplanted by now, your donor area has unfortunately experienced probably close to 3,000 extraction attempts by now. So you can actually subtract close to maybe even 3,000 grafts from your total donor zone capacity. If you have been watching this video until now, congratulations, because you arrived to the moral of this story. So what can we take from it? Well, I see it all the time with guys who want to get a hair transplant. Usually they want to get it fast because their schedule is free right now, but they also have only that much budget, and they try to kind of adapt their hair transplant decision to so many limitations and limiting constraints like budget. I want to have it in 2-3 weeks from now. I want to have it done there, not there. And then they are left with a limited options, which are not the best. If you want to work with me, there's a link in the description below where you can learn more about how I can help you out one-on-one with your hair transplant decision, with your hair loss management struggles, and let you know how I was able to overcome it, how my clients were able to overcome it and got great results. With that being said, thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'm going to be seeing you soon in another video. Take care. Avoid a failed or unnatural hair transplant. Receive best recommendations on clinics, doctors. Avoid wasting your time with treatments that don't work while your hair loss keeps on progressing further. And receive my opinion on your hair situation.